Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D, as always.
And I'm G, right? Yeah, I'm G. Yeah,
Good
thanks.
time.
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody. It's been a busy few days since we last recorded, and a lot of things going on. A lot of things moving fast in the news. And on the pregame tailgate tonight, I know we had trouble nailing down topics just because it seems like things break quicker than we almost can talk about them. So
Yep.
we're going to start off. We're going to talk about the Justice Department. We're going to talk about the Roe versus Wade controversy as it continues to linger on, and then about some Senate races. And we may throw a bonus in there we didn't even talk about. I just thought about saw some things about the January 6th committee too. So
Right.
If we have time for that. If not, we'll catch up with that one on the next podcast. But G-Man, why don't you tell us what's happening over at DOJ?
Well, a lot of Democrats, especially big money donor Democrats, are unhappy with our Attorney General, Merrick Garland. They're wondering what he's doing and why he's doing what he's doing, which is basically not doing anything. So a lot of the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats are perplexed as to why he's not serving subpoenas on people that the January 6th committee, which we just mentioned, has basically want to be held in contempt for not coming forth with documents or testimony for the January 6th commission. And then our former Attorney General, Eric Holder, came out on Sunday and said, based on just what he knows, which I'm guessing he knows about this. I mean, I think you keep your security clearance, but you would guess that he knows about the same stuff we do, that from what he's seen, there's enough evidence to take our former president, Donald Trump, before a grand jury and have him indicted for his efforts to overturn the election and basically mount a coup on January 6th. So, if he's saying that, I know that in years past, and the Justice Department has this memo that you don't indict a sitting president. Well, guess what? Mr. Trump isn't a sitting president anymore. The nation has founded on, and everybody says there's no person above the law. Well, if that's really true, and there's enough evidence, then let's impanel a grand jury and indict him. Let him have his day in court. If he's really innocent, then let a judge or a jury determine that fact. But stop sitting on the sideline, twiddling your thumbs. It's just really frustrating.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a lot of themes there that are important. And the bottom line to me is the main one that stands out is that no one's supposed to be above the law.
Yeah.
And if someone knowingly did these kinds of acts and they weren't a sitting president at the time when they did them, or a former president now, the question I always ask is, would they not have already been before a grand jury?
Absolutely.
Would they have already been indicted and already been facing formal charges for this? And I understand that Merrick Garland tends to be a very judicious person by all accounts, and a very by the books kind of person to do things the right way, and definitely don't want him to rush anything. But at the same time, you'd like to see some type of progress, because we're going to end up in a situation soon where everything's going to be up against an election. And, you can use an election as an excuse for anything. Oh, we can't do, look at Moscow Mitch McConnell. He always changes the rules around elections. Oh, we can't do a Democratic nominee before an election. Oh, but we can do a Republican nominee.
Right.
And so the bottom line is, we deserve, as the American people, the people who tried to overthrow our government, to be held to account.
Yeah.
And if they're brought before a jury of their peers and they're found not guilty of those charges, which is a big difference, by the way, of between not guilty and innocent.
Yeah.
But if they're found not guilty, then so be it. But I think all in all, there's a huge part of the country that wants to see something happen.
Yep.
And
I agree.
It's a frustration point when you sit here and you go, okay, I mean, I had to testify in a case earlier this year, and guess what? I was issued a subpoena.
Yep.
And as a witness. And it said very clearly on there that if I did not show up, I faced arrest for not showing up to the bench warrant to be there. And so it wasn't a bench warrant, excuse me, a subpoena, because I wasn't under arrest. I'm sure there's people who watch this think I should be, but there's just the level of inactivity. And again, I know that they can't always show their cards, but when you look at the January 6th charges that have been, and plea bargain deals that have been done, there's a lot of people that have said, well, these are comparable to other trespassing charges and other, desecration of public property and theft charges and those kinds of things. But I always go, did those, trespassing on public property, did that happen at the U.S. Capitol when we were trying, trying to certify an election? No, those were clear interference with a government process. And to me, the penalties have been way too light. The prosecutions have been way too lenient. And, it almost reminds me of a parallel when we were in the period after the Civil War, when there weren't a lot of major penalties handled down to people who fought on the Confederate side, and we still reap the rewards or the negativity of that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you and I have talked about this before, but there's a lot of and supposedly they're in the process of renaming them all, but there's a lot of forts and military bases that are named after people. Fort Hood in Texas, one of the largest used to be the largest open military base in the world, where you could just drive on it. You can't anymore, but named after John B. Hood, right? If we had dealt with these traitors, which, make no mistake, the South can say what they want. These people were traitors to the government. And just like John Adams and Ben Franklin were traitors to their government, the only difference is they succeeded and these guys didn't. If the South had succeeded, it would be a whole different world and a whole different story, but they didn't. If we had dealt with them like the British would have dealt with our traitors had they won, which would be to arrest them and hang them, then we wouldn't be having the problems that we have today, where the South thinks they're still fighting the Civil War. They can get away with the same stuff, just couch it a little differently. We see that every single day. Things happen in the South. An incident happened just a couple of days ago where the Georgia State Patrol pulled over a bus of, lacrosse girls from a college, a girls lacrosse team, and basically, brought the dog on board and went through all their belongings, all because they could, right? Not because they did anything wrong, just because they, the Georgia Patrol felt they could do it. They could harass these people. They wanted to show who was boss, and they got away with it. So if we had dealt with our traitors the way that we should have, we wouldn't be having the problems that we do today. You're exactly
well, and we've got a whole new set of traitors from January 6th. People
absolutely.
that went into our Capitol, used Trump flags to attack police officers for this group that supposedly backs the blue, that's supposedly always supporting law enforcement. We had people that stole things out of Speaker Pelosi's office. We had people that defecated in the U.S. Capitol. It's the first time in the history that we even during the Civil War, it didn't happen. People were carrying the Confederate battle flag in our Capitol.
Yep.
And to me, it's just you can't. And I think this is a big problem. We've talked about this before, but I think the Democrats, one of their biggest problems is they're still functioning under about a 1975 mentality of the other side.
Yep.
Then you're still functioning that like you have a good faith party on the other side that was willing to tell Richard Nixon he had to step down.
Yeah.
It was willing to tell Richard Nixon that, it wasn't the Democrats who really got Richard Nixon to resign. It was the Republicans. It was his own party.
Barry Goldwater.
They went down to the White House and said, Mr. President, you don't have the votes, so you're going to be removed.
Well, and not only that, but Barry Goldwater said, you don't have the votes and mine's not one of them. So
Right, and
he didn't have
you're not
Barry Goldwater's vote.
you're not just going to be impeached; you're going to be convicted and removed.
Right.
So, Democrats still operate like there's some kind of scintilla of that typical bipartisanship could happen, and it will not happen today. There's not a good faith
Right.
party on the other side.
Well, let's be clear. It's not the Democrats. It's Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who are basically Republicans. I mean, Joe Manchin just cut a spot for a Republican who's running for office in his state. So now, granted, he's running against a Trump endorsee, but still.
Well, he lost too. The guy who Manchin endorsed lost.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't do that stuff. You're a Democrat, man. You go, look, I'll make some phone calls for you on the sly, but yeah,
I'm happy to work with you if you're reelected or while you're in Congress to do things to benefit our state, but you don't get involved in their primary.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you know what he's doing though. He's just greasing his skids for either way, because I fully expect, which I think he's going to switch parties next time he runs, no matter what happens in the next couple of elections. I really think he will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he might as well. He's not doing anything but just holding up the Democratic agenda. So,
right.
And come November, his vote may be, if it goes the way we think, his vote may be irrelevant in the Senate. So, we'll see. But I think that's a pretty good segue to heading over to our next topic, which is still in the news, going to be in the news all the way through to November and probably beyond. And that's Justice Alito's draft report on abortion.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen this week, since in the just over a week and a half time that leaked, we've seen massive demonstrations in the streets, including demonstrations in front of Justice Alito, Justice Kavanaugh, and
Amy
leading
Coney Barrett.
I don't know if they found her house or not, but they also got Chief Justice Roberts' house as well. And I shouldn't say got the house, because that's really a mischaracterization. These are peaceful protesters that are carrying candles. I will note they also protested in front of Susan Collins' house, which is a whole different ball of wax. But she complained to the police that they had done a chalk outline of a body in front of her house, and the police came out to investigate, and they had not done a chalk outline. They had written a thought bubble asking her to vote the way that Mainers wanted her to vote, and to protect women's right to choose about their own bodies. Right. And police even refused to file a police report saying that there was no threat involved. And so,
which is classic.
A lot of people protesting, a lot of people rightfully upset in the streets about this. I will tell you that the junior senator from your home and great state of Texas, Senator Ted Cancun Cruz, he also gave an interview with Fox News where he compared these peaceful protesters to the January 6th insurrectionists, and said that these were the real insurrectionists and terrorists. And that's not a direct quote, but he implied that and said that, that these were party thugs of the Democratic Party, and that they were out there to intimidate these justices, and, that this was worse than anything that happened on January 6th, and that the media has falsely labeled all these hundreds of thousands of protesters peaceful protesters on January 6th, and that the real controversy ought to be these people protesting because they're trying to intimidate judges. And I'll note that at least the protest in front of Judge Brett I Like Beer Kavanaugh's house is those were organized directly by neighbors in his neighborhood. So his neighbors don't even like him.
Right. Well, I think we see what kind of person Brett Kavanaugh is, and Neil Gorsuch. And Susan Collins hit the nail right on the head. They basically they lied to her face when they were going through their confirmation hearings, and they were meeting with the individual senators, they lied straight to her face and told her, Roe was law, there's no need to overturn it. And then here, first chance they get, they're going to overturn it. So
well, I can't believe, it's really shocking that happened, because no one was telling Susan Collins that they were lying, and no one was, warning her about that vote. And I seem to remember her going to the floor of the Senate and saying that she wouldn't be intimidated, and she was going to vote for Brett Kavanaugh, and that he had assured her, and she felt very comfortable that he and Gorsuch would not overturn Roe. And so, I mean, Susan Collins is Susan Collins, and it disappoints me greatly that the people of Maine voted for her last time by over 9 points.
Yeah.
But she's a good salesperson. She sells herself as a moderate and as a centrist, and yet whenever she has opportunities to vote for things like she did today, when the Democrats brought forward the codification of Roe versus Wade, she voted against it.
Yep. And it failed, 51 to 49?
51 to 49. Manchin joined all the Republicans to vote against it. So Collins and Murkowski both claimed to be pro-choice, voted against it. They said this bill went too far because it went beyond Roe. It said the states couldn't put the restrictions like the Texas law that they have on place and things like that. And so those three claim that they want a simple codification of Roe, exactly as it's written, nothing additional added to it. And my negotiation point back to them, if I'm negotiating for Senate Democrats, is I'm saying, I will give you that vote if you want it, but you've got to agree that if you get that vote, you'll vote to break the filibuster to pass it.
Right.
So put your money where your mouth is, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. If you really want to vote for this, then vote to break the filibuster on this issue, and let's get it passed.
Don't they need 60 votes to break the filibuster, though?
Nope, you need 51.
Oh, gotcha.
Actually, you just need 50 plus one. So if all 50 Democrats would vote to do it, then Harris could do it because it's a simple rule change.
Right, but you've got Sinema and Manchin that won't. So you need Murkowski and Collins to vote for it. Yeah.
Well, and like I said, Manchin says he's for this bill, but that's Manchin's all performance art is all he is. You talk a big game about, remember he said that, and we predicted it. Pramila Jayapal predicted it too. But as soon as they separated Build Back Better from the infrastructure bill, it was dead, because Manchin said, "Yeah, we'll vote for it down the road. We're gonna," and then suddenly he's never named an amount that he would vote for.
Yep.
Never he'd get behind.
Well, the progressives were right in trying to hold it hostage, and then they finally caved. And I think they caved because Biden went to him and basically begged him to, so he could get some sort of victory. But I think if they would have held out, I think they would have gotten what they wanted.
Yeah. Well, it's
never known.
When you get assured by the president, you can get the votes. And then I think what happened is Sinema and Manchin lied directly to his face. Talk about lying.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, but getting back to abortion, on January 6th, people were beat. Nobody's getting beat in front of Kavanaugh's house. The place was vandalized, like you said. Nobody's getting vandalized. And, where was Ted Cruz and where was Moscow Mitch when anti-abortion activists were protesting in front of doctors' homes at all hours of the night, blasting music so they couldn't sleep, throwing blood on them and their family members, fetal matter, doing all kinds of crazy things. Where was Ted Cruz then?
In the most extreme, they even killed doctors.
Yeah, absolutely.
They bombed clinics.
Yeah.
They say, well, they should have the right to be able to protest in front of clinics, but they're okay with that, but they're not okay with these types of peaceful. It's a diversionary factor. Most polls show that 70% of the United States population wants to keep Roe v. Wade intact.
Yep.
Wants the decision to be up to a woman and her doctor and not have the federal government involved. It's amazing all these small government types that want to have the federal government telling people what they can and can't do. Isn't that funny how that works?
Yeah, and so that's a good segue to our last topic, which is the Pennsylvania Senate race on the GOP side, and we want we want to specifically talk about this person who hasn't gotten much press, but has kind of come out of nowhere, and she is basically neck and neck with the two front runners. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how that relates to what we found out by looking at her website before on the pregame tailgate show?
Yeah, Kathy Barnett is a political pundit, and she's running for Senate, like you said. And the Philadelphia Inquirer's poll this week came out with her in second place behind Mehmet Oz in a virtual three-way tie between Dr. Oz, Miss Barnett, and then David McCormick, who is the Wall Street financier. And I'll point out that Oz and McCormick both moved to Pennsylvania to run for the seat.
Right.
So she has emerged as kind of the conservative alternative to both these two, which people consider them carpetbaggers, coming into Pennsylvania to be able to run. And so Oz lived in New Jersey for decades before that, and then McCormick lived in Connecticut for years. Yep. And so Barnett's she's got an interesting a personal story, a background of rising out of poverty. She's crisscrossed the state, obviously completely polar opposite from John Fetterman on the Democratic side, but similarly, from what I've read, relentless campaigner, going to every part of the state, which is something Fetterman's done as well. And so she's only spent something like $1.6 million. And I know that sounds funny to say only $1.6 million, but you start looking at some of the other totals, and I mean, it's going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars on the Republican side between Oz and McCormick to try to win this seat. And she came in second in this poll. And so she actually came in at around 23 percentage points, and McCormick was at 21 and Oz was at 24. And so I think the margin of error is 3%, which means they're all right there neck and neck. And so this thing could go down to the wire. I should have asked you this on the pregame tailgate, but I can't remember. Is this a 50+1 runoff, or is this a winner take all like Ohio?
I think it's a winner take all.
That is wild, because with people that close, I mean, you go into Tuesday night next week and you could literally flip a coin. It could be any one of them.
Right. One other thing to note. So there's a little battle brewing in the Republican Party. We talked about it on the previous podcast, between Trump and the Club for Growth. And the Club for Growth yesterday just came out and announced they're going to spend $2 million in support of Kathy Barnett.
That's interesting, because they supported Josh Mandel in Ohio, and apparently Trump got into it with the executive director of Club for Growth, and then Club for Growth sent a text message to one of Trump's handlers and said something about they were going to put more money on the air for Mandel against J.D. Vance. It was more anti-J.D. Vance message than anything. And apparently the response that person got back from Trump's handler was Trump didn't want to talk, but basically the message was, and this was the quote, F off.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting battle right now. Trump, he won it with his endorsement last night in the West Virginia House race that we mentioned earlier.
Right.
Manchin endorsed the other candidate, but his preferred candidate he endorsed for governor of Nebraska lost in the runoff.
Right.
So that was him against the Ricketts family in Nebraska, the sitting governor right now. And of course, the Ricketts family, owners of the Chicago Cubs, painful for me to say, but they kind of flex their muscle against him. So you're seeing, I think he definitely still has a grip on the party, but when it is coordinated, you're seeing certain people break that grip.
Yep. Well, and like I said a while back, I think they're starting to realize that just because Trump says he's endorsing somebody doesn't mean they're going to win. And it certainly doesn't mean Trump's going to win if he decides to run again in 2024, which I don't think that he will. The date for the Senate primary is May 17th. So we've got 6 more days to go for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I just want to point out a couple things on Ms. Barnett's website. In her issue statements, under the issues, her point about being pro-life, she says, I value all life. Every person has potential to do great things. I will continue to promote alternatives to abortion. And then if I skip down a couple and go to mask mandates, Americans, with the advice of their medical professionals, must be able to make their own decisions as we face the continuation of the coronavirus pandemic. And then when I scroll up on this and look at some policy positions, when I look at medical freedom as one of her policy positions, she says, as your senator, I will, quote, vociferously defend your medical freedom. Medical freedom means patient autonomy. I get to decide what treatments I subject my body to. So I guess that applies for every medical situation except abortion.
Right.
That's what I'm to take it. So the medical autonomy of your own body stops when it comes to that, I guess. Okay.
Right. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out is that in the Nebraska governor election, which that's what it was, right?
Yes.
One of the things that Trump said, he says, well, we came really close. But one of the things he said was a factor was that there was a lot of people running. Well, there's 1, 2, 3. There's 7 people in the Pennsylvania Republican primary for Senate. So
I want to say there were like 5 running for Senate in Ohio too on the Republican side. There was a lot.
Right.
Well, you know what they say excuses are like, and everybody has them. So
I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to look and see if I can figure out if it's a 50+1 or winner take all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. While you're looking at that, it's looking like that even if they had a 50+1 rule, that John Fetterman's not going to need it, because last polls I saw him was around 54%.
Yeah, I think he's gonna. I mean, you never know. There's plenty of time for the race to tighten up, but it sure looks like the Democrats are going to take that seat.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up. Well, you know what? We got a little bit of bonus time. Let's do this. Let's just talk real quick about January 6th committee, because more and more emails are coming out. There's some emails from John Eastman today, the Trump attorney, who, by all accounts and purposes, I call him Colonel Coup,
right?
Because he's pretty much the person who was trying to lead the legal arguments for the coup against our government to overturn the election. He apparently was emailing a state representative in Pennsylvania trying to make suggestions about how to throw out ballots. Basically, just come up with a formula where you can say every so many ballots need to be thrown out for some reason. And I mean, this is all in an email. It's documented. And you and I've said it before. We've gotten accused by people of being hyperbolic and saying, oh, henny penny, the sky is falling. But it's like, people do not realize how close we came to having our government and therefore our whole way of life being overturned on January 6th of 2021.
Right.
It was close. It was close. And but for a handful of Republicans, people like Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp in Georgia, well, I'm not big fans of either one of those guys, and Mike Pence. I mean, if they had taken the advice they were given and stepped outside of their legal roles, this would have went to a Supreme Court, which would have been made up exactly as it is now. And we would have been facing the fact that the court would have rubber stamped an overturn of our government. And at that point, we would have had just nothing but chaos.
Yep.
But the same thing in 2016, when people campaigned, and I was one of them as well, that said women's right to have control of their bodies is on the ballot in 2016. And people said, yeah, but what about Hillary's emails? And they said, I just don't like Hillary. I don't like Hillary. Well, guess what? Women's right to have autonomy over their body is about to end.
Yep.
It's all because of that election. It's all because people, and when you said that in 2016, people would say, oh, you're being dramatic. You're being hyperbolic. That'll never happen. Roe will never be overturned. Look at it now.
Yep. It's about to be overturned.
All right. Well, that takes us to the end of our time, I believe. I hope everybody's staying safe out there. We'll be back soon with another edition of the GD Report. G, any last comments?
Yeah, I was just trying to find out if it was winner take all. I'll have to do some research and maybe call the Pennsylvania election board and figure it out for our next podcast. But I'll check on that and get back with everybody.
Hey, everybody, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you real soon. Everybody, take care. Good night.
Good night.